Alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, everyone. It's good to be with you this morning. Uh, I'll remind myself and all of you um, it's good to be reminded that the mission and vision and statement for us is to be a non-judgmental, encouraging, empowering organization. I hope you're experiencing that. Uh, so a warm welcome, a radical welcome to all of you this morning. I'd like to thank those of you who donate to the organization and remind you that it's the end of the year. So if you need a tax deduction, your gifts to Islamic are tax deductible. In terms of prayer concerns, please continue to pray for the Tate family and their move and all of that. Those with child, and the special dua for Doug and Mika who lost their cat. So if there are any other prayer requests, if you put them in the chat, I will mention them to the family. A reminder that next Saturday night, November the 19th, we'll have our monthly potluck. It will be at Gennard and Claudette's house, which is over near the Lake Nona area. And we're going to do it at 5 p.m. So I hope everybody heard that 5 p.m. because Maghrib is at 5:28. And since it's on a Saturday, we thought if we could do it at 5, then we pray and then eat, everything would be really nice. It would work nicely with the lovely daylight saving time. The window is only an hour and 7 minutes between Maghrib and Isha. So it'll be important for us to get there and to pray at say 5:30 and then eat and have a nice evening. So I think that's all the announcements that I have for today. إن الحمد لله تعالى نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. Indeed, all the praise is due to Allah. We seek Allah's help and forgiveness. We seek refuge with the Almighty Allah from the evil in our soul and from our bad actions. Whomsoever Allah Azza wa Jal guides, they will never be led astray, and whomsoever Allah leaves astray, no one can guide them. I bear witness that there is no deity, there is no God but Allah, the one having no partners, and I bear witness that Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is Allah's final slave and messenger, the seal of prophets. يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله حق تقاته ولا تموتن إلا وأنتم مسلمون. O you who have believed, fear Allah as Allah alone should be feared, and do not die except as Muslims in submission to Allah. يا أيها الناس اتقوا ربكم الذي خلقكم من نفس واحدة وخلق منها زوجها وبعث منهما رجالا كثيرا ونساء واتقوا الله الذي تساءلون به والأرحام إن الله كان عليكم رقيبا. O people, be dutiful to your Lord who created you from one soul and created from it its mate and dispersed from both of them many men and women. And fear Allah through whom you demand mutual rights and revere the wombs for you. Indeed, Allah is ever over you an observer. يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله وقولوا قولا سديدا يصلح لكم أعمالكم ويغفر لكم ذنوبكم ومن يطع الله ورسوله فقد فاز فوزا عظيما. O you who have believed, fear Allah and speak words of appropriate justice. Allah will then amend for you your deeds and forgive you your sins. And whoever obeys Allah and Allah's messenger has certainly attained a great attainment. I'm about to proceed. So last week, we looked at the Holy Quran and the ahadith relevant to music in Islam, and we talked about the historic and current physical, mental, and spiritual effects of sound. and I got a lot of feedback about that class. MashaAllah. So, we began the 8th of August in 2021. We started talking about the New Year's resolution for the Islamic New Year. And we had this intention to focus on elevating our ranks as seekers of the divine in pursuit of the alchemy of happiness. And so, to my recollection, we have completed about 31 classes that came just from the introduction of this book, by the way. And so today I wanted to pause for a moment to give you some history about Imam Ghazali. I don't know how much you, my students, actually know about Imam Ghazali, so I thought I would share a little bit about that. And I also wanted to share personally why his works are so near and dear to my heart. As many of you know, in 1980 or 81, when I traveled to South Africa, I heard the Adhan and had this cathartic spiritual experience where I began to cry profusely. And at that time, it was not normal for me to cry. And I believe that Allah called me that day to be a Muslim. It took me 7 years before I did my Shahada, but I studied the religion independently without having any Muslim friends or any kind of connection to anyone who was in Islam. And close to the time that I did do my Shahada, I was searching. I went to a very famous bookstore. I don't know if any of you might remember the movie with Shirley MacLaine, I.S.L.A.M. The bookstore was featured in that. It was established in, I think, the 70s, and I think the bookstore closed around 2011. And the bookstore happened to be near the Pacific Design Center where I was working in interior design at the time. And so I found my way in that bookstore and then ended up purchasing the 4 volumes of I.S.L.A.M. We'll talk a little bit more about that specific book. But I fell in love with Imam Ghazali, and it just made so much sense. And every year or two, I would review those volumes in terms of my own personal spiritual striving and trying to get closer to Allah. But Imam Ghazali's full name was Abu Hamid Muhammad ibn Muhammad al-Tusi al-Ghazali. And so, as you will often find in Arabic, people's names are connected to where they are from. So Al-Tus is where he was born. Tus is an ancient city in the Razavi Khorasan province in eastern Iran, near Mashhad, in the year 450. So that 450 AH, pretty profound. And that would be corresponding to 1050 in the Common Era. And he died the 14th of Jumada Thani and 505 after the Hijri, which corresponds to the year of 1111, at the age of 53. So he did have a very short life. He was educated in Tus and began with some actual jurisprudence, some fiqh, some Islamic jurisprudence as a child. He then went to Nishapur, where he attended the lessons of Imam Haramain al-Jawani, who earned the title of Imam al-Haramain, the Imam or leading master of the 2 sacred cities in Mecca and Medina. After his death, after al-Jawani's death, in 1085, he was invited to go to the court of Nizam al-Mulk, the powerful vizier of the Seljuk, or the Turkish dynasty, the Seljuk sultans. So the vizier was so impressed by Imam Ghazali and his scholarship that in 1091 he appointed al-Ghazali at 33 years of age the chief professor at the Nizamiya College in Baghdad, which at that time was the largest university in the medieval world. He lectured, or while lecturing to more than 300 students, Imam Ghazali was also mastering and critiquing or criticizing the Neoplatonist philosophies of Al-Farabi and Abyssinian. And I mentioned last week about Al-Farabi because he wrote this book about music. He passed through, interestingly enough, a spiritual crisis that rendered him physically incapable of lecturing for a time. And so in November of 1095, around the age of 37, he abandoned his career. He left Baghdad on the pretext that he was going to pilgrimage. And when he actually left the university actually housed 3,000 students. He made arrangements for his family. He disposed of his wealth and adopted the life of a poor Sufi, a mystic. It is proposed, it is posited that at some point he sort of repudiated, or he sort of came back to where he was, sort of a balance. And I love him too, because I know that in my life there have been ups and downs spiritually. There have been times when maybe I was rigid. Then there was a season where I was, there have been seasons, so I'm sure all of you relate to that. Seasons where I felt discouraged, like I wasn't learning, just all kinds of different seasons. So this appealed to me, this man who was responsible for so many great books, and I'll share more about those in a few minutes. He went through these difficulties like sometimes we go through. He then spent some time in Damascus and Jerusalem, and did go to Mecca in 1096. After this, he settled back in Tus, where Sufi disciplines or disciples joined him in a virtually monastic communal life. At 1106, in 1106, at around 43, he was persuaded to return to teaching at the Nizamiya College at Nishapur in Iran. And a consideration in this decision was that a renewer, it's called a mujaddid, of the life of Islam was expected at the beginning of each century, and his friends argued that he was a mujaddid, a renewer for the century beginning in September of 1106. And so you might say, well, now, is this the Sunnah? Is this authentic? In Kitab al-Mulahem by Abu Dawood, it says that the Prophet ﷺ said, at the beginning of every century, Allah will send to this ummah someone who will renew its religious understanding. Now, there are a number of different sort of scholarly interpretations of this hadith. Some literalists believe that every 100 years somebody does come along that tries to, I don't like the word reform because that would mean to change. So I like the call to revive. So they are like revivalists in my understanding. And this hadith is well known. It's Sahih hadith, and it was narrated by Abu Hurairah, the great Sahabi. He continued lecturing in Nishapur at least until 1110, when he returned to Tus, where he died the following year. So here's a person that inspired me because he strove so earnestly and exerted himself and emerged the most discerning man of his era. He became the Imam of Iraq after having attained the status of the Imam of Khorasan. His rank in Baghdad rose above the princes, the viziers, high-ranking political advisors or ministers, men of reverence, and the household of the caliphate. A total of about 70 works can be attributed to Imam Ghazali. The Heart and the ones on the 99 Beautiful Names of Allah, and both of those are available in English. I know the remembrance of death in the hereafter. I've actually taught on that. I have it in my library. It is available in English. And you could just Google Imam Ghazali's books and you will find all of the books that are translated. One of the books I have in my library is Disciplining the Soul, Breaking the Two Desires. Another one of his books was Patience and Thankfulness. Another one was Love, Longing, Intimacy, and Contentment. And then I.S.L.A.M, the Revival of Religious Sciences, was the books that I first purchased back in 1985. He wrote a book, Minhaj al-Abidin, a program for worshipers. He wrote Al-Munzik min ad-Dalal, the savior from deviation. He wrote Emilia Sadat, the evidence of goodness. Of course, he wrote The Alchemy of Happiness, Disciplining the Self. I also have those in my library, as well as the Book of Knowledge he wrote. Jewels of the Quran. I want to get that. I don't have that. The Book of Counsel, he is also available in English. I haven't read that. I do have the book, The Manners Relating to Eating. And this is all the sunnahs in the Quran pages giving us advice about eating. And then there's one called The Beginning of Guidance that he wrote. He was also known to have written fatwas against the Taifa king of Al-Andalus, declaring him to be unprincipled, not fit to rule, and that he should be removed from power. So he was a very, very powerful man, very brave and very courageous man of his era. His works were so highly acclaimed by his contemporaries that Al-Ghazali was awarded the honorific title Proof of Islam, Hujjat al-Islam. So he was actually called the Proof of Islam. I mean, this is very powerful. Al-Ghazali believed that the Islamic spiritual tradition had become moribund, that it had sort of declined, that people had sort of deviated away from the correct way. He felt that it was stagnating and sort of like dying, and that the spiritual sciences taught by the first generation of Muslims had been forgotten, and he made it his calling to try to recall people, to revive the Sunnah, to revive the practices of the earliest Muslims. And there's a great reward. I meant to look this hadith up, but it's a great reward for reviving the Sunnah. And I know that in my own life, I've tried to revive the Sunnah, where the Prophet ﷺ said, if you love your brother or sister, tell them I love you for the sake of Allah, and then they should retort, may he who has caused you to love me love us more. And so there's certain little hadiths that I learned along the way that I've tried to teach and encourage people to practice. And I was so touched because 2 weeks ago on Friday, when I did the khutbah at the Daytona Islamic Center, Doug and Mika came, and I was so touched that after the khutbah, Doug came and said, I love you for the sake of Allah. It just really warmed my heart. So this belief, this iman, this amazing elevation, illumination, the luminary man, was led to write his magnum opus, which was entitled I.S.L.A.M, the Revival of the Religious Sciences. Among other works, he wrote Tahafud al-Philosopher, which is the incoherence of the philosophers. And it was a landmark in the history of philosophy as it advances the critique of Aristotelian science, developed later in the 14th century in Europe. So Margaret Smith wrote a book called Al-Ghazali the Mystic. And in it, she relates what took place on the day after his death, according to his brother Arthur. And it's amazing because I sort of see a pattern of people who have really studied alams. My Sheikh, Sheikh Taha Jabir al-Alwani, who taught at Al-Azhar, mashallah, he wrote something just before he died that was published and sent out to his students. And so here's what she says. At dawn on the day of his death, Al-Ghazali performed his ablution and prayed, and then said to his brother, "Bring me my shroud." And taking it, he kissed it and laid it over his eyes and said, "Most gladly do I enter into the presence of the king." And he stretched out his feet and went forth to meet Allah, and so passed into the paradise of Allah, worthy of all honor, of the loftier station than the stars, giving more guidance to men than the full moon when darkness has fallen. This is what she said about it. He was buried outside of Tus, Iran, in a grave near that of the Persian poet Firdausi. Ibn al-Sam'ani, one of the great imams of history, records that he actually visited Imam Ghazali's grave. Now, there are some bid'ahs that take place not because of him, but because of people's ignorance sometimes at some of these great sheikh, great scholars' graves. People will pray to them and ask them to make intercession, which is completely, as you learn, haram. No one entered his presence until the next morning when they went in as he had bidden them. They found him facing the Qibla, clad in his shroud, dead, and at his head they found a sheet of paper bearing these verses. And this is what he wrote: "Say to my friends when they look upon me dead, weeping for me and mourning me in sorrow, do not believe that this corpse you see is myself." And just let me interject that the Prophet said the astute believer multiplies his memory of death. So it's important because the death is said to be a khutbah. In other words, when we go to somebody's janazah prayer, if they didn't have their things in order, they didn't live a good life, it's like you could be next. What provisions are you bringing to this place? So let me go get back to what he said. In the name of God, I tell you, it is not I. I am a spirit, and this is nothing but flesh. It was my abode and my garment for a time. I am a treasure, but a talisman. And that means that he was an object that averted evil. I am a talisman kept hid, fashioned of dust, which served me as a shrine. I am a pearl that has left its shell deserted. It was my prison where I spent my time in grief. I am a bird, and this body was my cage, whence I have now flown forth, and it is left as a token. Praise be to Allah, who has now set me free and prepared for me my place in the highest of the heavens. Now I live in truth with the grave clothes discarded. Today I hold conversations with the saints above. Now with no veil between me, I see Allah face to face. I look upon the tablets, Lawh al-Mahfuz, and therein I read, whatever was and is and all that is to be. Let my house fall in ruins. Lay my cage in the ground. Cast away the talisman. It is a token no more. Lay aside my cloak. It was but my outer garment. Place them all in the grave. Let them be forgotten. I have passed on my way, and you are left behind. Your place of abode was no dwelling place for me. Think not that death is death. Nay, it is life. A life that surpasses all we could dream of here. While in this world we are granted sleep. Death is but sleep. Sleep that shall be prolonged. Be not afraid when death draws near. It is but the departure for this blessed home. Think of the mercy and love of your Lord. Give thanks for Allah's grace and come without fear. What I am now, even so shall you be. For I know that you are even as I am. The souls of all people come forth from Allah. The bodies of all are compounded alike. Good and evil alike, it was ours. I give you now a message of good cheer. May God's peace and joy forevermore be yours. And this was what he wrote on his deathbed. The author's foreword of the Alchemy of Happiness begins, should I say, naturally or spiritually with, in the name of Allah, the merciful, the compassionate. And it's titled, My Trust in Him, my tawakkul, my reliance in Allah. Listen for a moment to the beautiful writing style of his introduction. He says, abundant gratitude and thanks in the number of the stars in the sky, the droplets of the rain, the leaves of the trees, the grains of sand in the desert, and the particles of the earth and the sky, to that God whose attribute is oneness and whose special nature is majesty, divinity, greatness, superiority, glory, and goodness. No created being is cognizant of the perfection of Allah's majesty. No one may penetrate the truth of Allah's knowledge. And the word that is used by many of the Sufis is marifat, and it means the mystical knowledge of Allah or the higher realities and illuminations of Allah Azza wa Jal. He goes on and he says, indeed, the declaration of our inability to do so is the limit of the knowledge of the truly righteous. If we want this knowledge, we must elevate our ranks and earn this knowledge. The confusion about the shortcomings in praising and appreciating Allah is the furthest limit of the angels and prophets' praise of Allah. The furthest limits of the intellects of the intelligent concerning the principles of the illumination of Allah's sublimity is bewilderment, and the end of the journey of the wayfarers and disciples in their search for the presence of Allah's beauty is astonishment. Losing hope in the gnosis, the experiential knowledge of Allah, is the denial of Allah's attributes, while the claim to the perfection of knowing Allah is similarity of creating things with the names and acts of Allah. An imitation or appearing of the image of. So he says that when we adopt the asma wa sifat, the names and the attributes of Allah, and we implement them. And it reminds me of the beautiful hadith that talks of the donkey. The donkey can have all of the knowledge in the world, but if it doesn't implement it, it's actually a curse to the donkey. It's a weight. So it's so important to get the knowledge and then to implement it. The portion of those eyes which would gaze upon the beauty of Allah's essence is bedazzlement. The result to all intellect from looking at the wonders of Allah's creation is necessary knowledge. And we see here that here is a man that sees Allah Azza wa Jal in everything, the sands of the desert, everything. Let no one not reflect upon the nature and the what of the vastness of Allah Azza wa Jal's essence. Let no heart cease for one moment to neglect the wonders of Allah's creation and question the nature and origin of Allah's existence, so that one necessarily recognizes that all are the signs of Allah's power and the light of Allah's grandeur. All these are the invitations and marvels of Allah's wisdom. All of the rays of the beauty of Allah's presence. All are Allah's indeed. The existence of all things is but a ray of the light of Allah's existence. Praise be to Muhammad, the chosen one, who is the Lord of the prophets, the guide and the way for the believers. He is the trustee of the secrets of divinity, chosen and selected by the divine presence, and praise be to his helpers, his Ansar, and the people of his house, each one of whom is a model for the nation and the disclosure of the way of the religious law. Now know that mankind was not created frivolously or upon a whim. Instead, his or her role is great, and his or her peril is great. I think so much that we need to be reminded of this in our hope, that we are great because of Allah, and we can do great things. We just have to keep the ego out of it. Though the human being is not eternal and does not live forever, though his or her body is earth and clay, the truth of his or her spirit is exalted and divine. This is how we need to think of ourselves. My spirit is exalted and divine, not my ego. His or her essence, though it is mixed and permeated in the beginning with bestial, wild, and satanic characteristics, is cleansed of these impurities and becomes fit for the divine presence when he or she strives to make tawbah, to repent. From the lowest of the low to the highest of the high, all the dips and rises are the human being's work. The lowest of the low is he or she who descends to the level of the beasts, predatory animals, and Satans. He or she is the prisoner of his or her carnal appetite, lust, and anger. The highest of the high is he or she who attains the level of the angels and is liberated from this. His or her carnal appetites of lust and anger. Both of them, appetite or lust and anger. And these are, by the way, the two desires that Imam Ghazali addresses in the book about controlling the two desires. The whole book about this. Both of them, appetite or lust and anger, become his or her prisoners, and he or she their ruler. We want to become the prison. We want our appetites to become our prisoners, ruled by our heart that is filled with Quran and Sunnah. When he or she attains such sovereignty, he or she becomes worthy of service to the divine presence. And such worthiness is the attribute of the angels and the perfection of the state of the human being. We talk about kamil in Arabic, which means perfect and complete, the root of the name Kamila. And for men, that name kamil is often found in the Arab world. When he or she enjoys the pleasures of the beauty of the divine presence, he or she will not be able to withhold him or herself from its contemplation for one moment. May Allah make us to reach the status, to reach this maqam, to reach the station, to experience the sweetness of Allah's illumination when we connect with Allah. Gazing upon that beauty becomes his or her heaven. May Allah make our heaven gazing on the beauty of Allah. That heaven, which is the result of the appetite of the eyes, the genitals, and the stomach, will be curtailed for him or her. To remember the verse that says they make certain things their God instead of Allah. Since the essence of the human being is at the outset of creation deficient and base, it is not possible for him or her to attain the stage of perfection from this deficiency without strenuous effort and of application. Just as the alchemy which transforms copper and bronze to the purity and beauty of pure gold is difficult and not known by very many people, so too the alchemy which will transform the essence of the human being from baseness and bestiality to the purity and pre-consciousness of the angelic state, the fitra, so as to achieve everlasting happiness, that natural disposition to call and return to Allah. It is difficult and not known by many. The purpose of Imam al-Ghazali's book is to describe that mixture of this alchemy, which in truth is the alchemy of eternal spiritual bliss and happiness. It is with this in mind that Imam Ghazali named his book The Alchemy of Happiness. The name alchemy, he says, is preferred because the difference between copper and gold lies not in yellowness. The reward of this alchemy is nothing more than mere wealth in this world. How long does this world itself last? How great is the difference between bestial and angelic attributes, from the lowest of the low to the highest of the high. But the fruit of this alchemy of happiness is eternal. There is no limit to it. Its varieties of pleasure have no end, nor shall any annoyance tarnish its pleasure. Know that the philosopher's stone, chemia, of the alchemist is not to be found in someone's cupboard. Rather, it is found in the treasures of kings. We want to become kings of our extremities. We want our heart to become the king of our being and of our behavior. So too, the alchemy of happiness is not everywhere. It is in the divine treasury. That's where we find it. And the treasury of Allah is the essence of the angels and the heavens and the hearts of the prophets on earth. So anyone other than the noble prophets seeks to achieve this alchemy. And he's making a point here, which makes sense in the next sentence. He says, anyone other than the noble prophets seeks to achieve this alchemy in error. He's talked about the difficulty of trying to achieve this. In the season of the resurrection, his or her insolvency will be disclosed and his or her false coinage made public. His or her imaginings will disgrace him or her, and it will be said to him or her what we find in Surah Al-Qaf, in the 50th surah of the Holy Quran in verse 22. You were certainly in unmindfulness of this, and we have removed from you your cover, so your sight this day is sharp. We have removed from thee thy covering, and piercing is thy sight this day. We're going to have better than 20/20 vision that day. We're going to see things with the alacrity of mind and heart. But the greatest of the mercies of Allah Most High, one is that Allah sent 124,000 prophets to mankind, from Adam A.S.L.A.M to Muhammad ﷺ, for this purpose, to teach them the formula of this alchemy and to inform them how to place their heart in the crucible of striving, and how to cleanse from it the immoral characteristics from which come the wickedness and tarnishing of the heart, and how to draw the praiseworthy attributes to it. It was for this that Allah Azza wa Jal, in his own sovereignty and purity, that Allah further glorified himself by sending the prophets. May Allah be pleased with all of them. And then Allah tasked them, saying what is found in chapter 62, Surah Al-Jumu'ah, verse 1 and 2 of the Holy Quran. Such a beautiful verses. All that is in the heavens and all that is in the earth glorify Allah, the sovereign Lord, the Holy One, the Mighty, the Wise. It is Allah who hath sent among the unlettered ones a messenger of their own, to recite unto them his revelations, and to purify them, and to teach them the book of wisdom. Though before this they were indeed in manifest error, they were in ignorance. This purifying them was to cleanse them of unbecoming traits, which are the attributes of the brutish beast. Teach them the book and wisdom was that mankind be clothed in the remnant of angelic attributes, because it was the angel Gabriel that delivered that message to the prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The object of this alchemy is to strip away all that should not be, the attributes of deficiency, and to adorn a person with what should be the attributes of perfection. The mystery of this alchemy is that one must turn away from this world and bring oneself to Allah Most High, as he first taught the Prophet ﷺ, saying what we find in chapter 73 of the Holy Quran and Surah Al-Muzammil, verse 8. And listen to this, and then look at what Imam Ghazali's intention to do was. He says, remember the name of thy Lord and devote thyself to him. A great and complete devotion, he says. Not half measures, but a great and complete devotion. The meaning of devotion is to cut oneself off from all else and give ourselves to Allah in our entirety. And for those of us who have tried to study certain things at the highest level, or as high as we can go, we know that it requires devotion. We have to sacrifice time with family, time perhaps to have fun in order to get there. Devotion is something that we don't see today. I even see that deviation from devotion from the earlier years of my life. The topic of the alchemy's prolegomenon, or introduction, is on knowing oneself. And you've heard me often say, to know yourself is to know Allah. The key to the knowledge of Allah is in the knowledge of one's own self. In Surah 41, verse 53, we will show them our signs in the horizons and within themselves until it becomes clear to them that it is the truth. Are we looking for the signs, the ayat, the guidance? Are we asking for it? This is the way our true nature is revealed to us. We have to seek and strive for it. In a word, there is nothing closer to you than you. If you do not know yourself, how can you know anything else? And from this, as a therapist, I will say to my clients, I have one rule. You cannot say, I do not know, because you do know why you do what you do. You might not want to look at it, but you do know. If you do not know yourself, how can you know anything else, or your relation to anything else? He says you're lying indeed. If you say you know yourself, you're in grievous error. You know nothing more about yourself than your head, your face, your hand, your feet, your flesh, and your external skin. So people can tell you what color their eyes are, how tall they are, if they've got a big head, a small head, a lot of hair, not much hair, thin hair, curly hair, coarse hair. They can tell you all, I've got flat feet, don't have flat feet. They can tell you all kinds of things. But all you know about your insides, he says, is that when you are hungry, you must eat. When you are angry, you must fight. When lust or sexual appetite overcomes you, you seek to copulate. In this, you are the equal of the beasts of burden. Therefore, you must seek out the truth about yourself. What sort of thing are you? Where did you come from? Where are you going? What have you come to this stopping place? Why have you come to this stopping place? For what purpose were you created? What is your happiness? And where does it lie? And what is your misery? And where does it lie? As for those attributes which are gathered inside of you, some are the attributes of beasts of burden. Some are the attributes of predatory animals. We lash out at each other. We grab the other person's food sometimes. We have these attributes like animals. We kill. We're greedy like some animals. And then we have to remember that some of the attributes of the angels, That's what we want to see inside of ourselves. So you have to look, which one is you? Which one is me? Am I the one that's the beast of burden? Am I like a predatory animal? Am I like a hyena that laughs at people and then chews them up and spits them out, laughs in their face and talks about them behind their back? Am I a slithering snake hiding and waiting to attack? We need to ask ourselves the question, which one am I? Which is the truth of your essential nature, while the others are foreign and borrowed. They are learned behavior from my environment. If you do not know this, if you do not know who you are, you cannot seek your own happiness, because for each of these, there is a different nutriment and a different happiness. Or the beasts of burden, their nutriment and their happiness is eating, sleeping, and copulating, serving the self. If you are of their kind, you try to satisfy your stomach and your sexual organs night and day. And in my years of therapy, and I remember specifically when I was at UCF for 2 years as a counselor, how I would meet young folks that every weekend their intention, their goal was to try to sleep with someone different. And they called it getting another notch in their belt. So they were trying to elevate their ranks as an animal. But even worse than the animal, the beast, because the animal will only mate when they're in heat. As for predatory beast, their nutriment and their happiness is in giving free rein to tearing apart things, killing, sowing fitna, making trouble and trials and rage. The nutriments of Satan's is the encouragement of evil, treachery, and deceit. If we are of them, we need to get busy to change our life and to attain our ease and good fortune. As for the angels, their nutriment and their happiness is the contemplation of the divine presence. They are immune from the lust, anger, and the attributes of the beast and predators. If you have the angelic essence in your nature, strive to come to know the divine presence and open yourself to the contemplation of its beauty. Liberate yourself from the grip of lust and anger. And think about it, folks. The root of anger is unmet need. I'm angry because I wanted something and I didn't get it. Most anger, the root of it is unmet need. I want and didn't get it, now I'm angry. Strive until you understand the reason for the creation of these bestial traits within you. Were they created to capture you, to carry you into service of the self, and to enslave you in forced labor day and night? You must capture them before they capture you. You must make the one your vehicle and the other your weapon for the journey that has been put before you. Use them in these few days that we are in this stopping place to hunt, with their aid, the seed of your own spiritual happiness. When you have obtained that seed of happiness, place those tools underfoot and turn your face to the resting place of your own spiritual happiness. That resting place for which the elite expression is the divine presence, and for which the common expression is paradise. So inshallah, next week and next class, we will look at the outer form and the inner spirit, and we will begin to go more deeply into that part of understanding. Now, it may be, and I would like to get a consensus, if you would, please, in the chat, that next weekend being the Thanksgiving weekend, if you're going to be with family, we don't have to have class on next Sunday. If everybody could tell me if you're not going to be available, if everybody could just do a not available in the chat, that'll give me an idea whether we should have the class. And we don't normally have it, so I guess but we'll just take off next week, and then we'll return the week after that. And we also have the potluck, so we don't have a class after the potluck too. So forgive me. Oh Allah, grant us goodness in this world and goodness in the hereafter, and save us from the chastisement of the fire. Oh Allah, lay not on us a burden greater than we have strength to bear. Blot out our sins and grant us forgiveness. Have mercy on us. Thou art our protector. Help us against those who stand against faith. O Allah, let not our hearts deviate after thou hast guided us, but grant us mercy from thine own presence. For thou art the granter of bounties without measure. As-salamu alaykum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.